I got this at 5:31, so actually just a budget meeting, so we'll go ahead and get started. And what we're basically going to do tonight is review it. I know we're forwarding this out to the council. I hope you had some opportunity to maybe go through some of it. I know it was several pages. First of all, I want to thank Jessica and Damon, because they spent a lot of hours in the back room back there. And they have worked this and worked it extremely hard. And I think I mentioned our City County Connection meeting the other night how challenging possibly this budget has been. And this is my 19th year, and our first 2 or 3 years was very, very challenging. Andrew, you can probably remember those days back then with the guards. But this budget, of course, you know, our city has continued to grow. When I started, we had 109 employees. Now we have 150, and that increases during the summer months. We get up to 175, 180 employees. And so with all that things, it takes a lot to run this municipality. But like I said, we've had challenges, but they've worked extremely hard through this thing. This is probably a bare bones budget. We tried to be realistic on our revenue, because at the end of the day, you know, we have to guesstimate sometimes on what our budget is, what funding that we may have coming in, whether it be turn back or sales tax revenue. The revenue has been fairly good this year, especially on the sales tax. But on the other hand, like I mentioned, here 3 years ago, around or 4 years ago, we were paying, just for an example, a Ram pickup for our people. We're buying the base pickup $26,000. Same vehicle closer to 45 to 50,000 when we get those. And of course, employees, insurance. That's another thing that I think just about everyone, even the general public, is challenged with health insurance. Health insurance was over 80 grand increase this year. We've also, all of our buildings and all of our automobiles and everything. Of course, automobiles are covered through Arkansas Municipal League. We get a really good rate on that. But even our building insurance, we have put an increase on there. But it is challenging. I think we're seeing everything, the expense go up. And I've also used the thing about even the fire department in 07. And I've said this more than one time. Our tower truck that we had was $750,000 back in 07. Now we're looking at probably $1.5 to $2 million for a tower truck. And that thing's a 2007 model. So those are some challenges. This budget also, we really looked at employees, and we were not able to add any employees in this budget right here because it's really that close. A lot of the capital, we've combed over it, we've looked at it, and we've had to take out some of the, we always have our department heads to kind of push their list out there, prioritize 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 what they need. But we feel like that we're in pretty good shape with most of our capital. There is some capital in there. But this also reflects, this one right here, is that we have a 2% increase for all of our employees. We did not pass. We absorbed that 80-something thousand in the budget for the insurance. So those are some things that we just, I just wanted to get out to let you guys know right off. And first of all, I'd like to maybe just see any of the council, you guys have some reflection in a certain area that you want to look at, or if you want to go through page by page all the way through, or if you made maybe some personal notes. I know Jessica and Damon are very well aware of this budget and the budgetary things that we have before us. We're about almost 40,000, I think, to the good in the general fund. I think the operation and maintenance, the tax, I think we're about 16,000, somewhere 14 to 16,000 to the good on that. And like I said, this is something we did not have until 2012, 2013. So it's worked good for us. But that's all I'm going to say for right now. So, council, I'm going to open it up to you guys right now.
As far as our fees charged at the community center and things like that, we're gonna get posed on that as far as increase or anything.
You know, we have not. We can always give that a good look. We've tried to keep it very affordable. I think that's a general thing because, of course, our citizens stepped up and passed the sales tax. We did have to increase this 2 or 3 years ago. I mean, just our entry fee, because you guys can remember in 2017 when we opened it up, just for an example, we were paying a night lifeguard $8 an hour. And now those lifeguards are probably $11 to $15 an hour. Depends on the position that they're in. So everything has improved. We do have a perpetual fund. Of course, the last council meeting or the time before, I know we voted to go ahead out of the perpetual fund and replace a lot of the equipment there. All of those things can be reviewed. You know, we always try to keep even our sports. We try to keep those very affordable for the, you know, for the youth. But I mean, those are some things that we could look at too. It's probably not going to raise that much revenue, but we know other families are challenged as well. So we like to, you know, try to keep that community center as affordable as we can.
Greg, the thing I was going to ask, are we charging non-residents more than residents of the city for memberships?
I think we always have. I believe that's like a $5.
I'm talking about for membership, right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, if you live outside the city limits. Yeah,
so it's just amazing. I'd say it's just amazing how many non-residents are there every day.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sure is. And you know, when we first opened, if you guys remember, you individuals that were here, we opened it up to anyone in Independence County or surrounding counties to join there. One other thing that we did, we're trying to know, Paige, you brought this up a couple years ago when you, now I think your membership, just like when you pay your AT&T, if you get it online or whatever, it continues to be, it does not just drop you after the year. So hopefully we've got that part corrected, and maybe that helps us maintain, you know, our memberships. I think at one time we have over 8,000 members, so it appears to do well. Seemed like the revenue was down a little bit, but we did on the indoor pool last year, what we call the party pool, the kids pool. Of course, that was down most of the year, so that we had that leak, and it seemed like it took forever to get that repaired.
I would ask on page 2, revenue category 433, court automation. See a significant increase in expected revenue of 360.
So that's,
what is that?
that is, we used to not get our fine money from the county, and now we do. You'll also look, you'll see an expenditure as well, because we don't get to keep all that money. We get to keep about half of it. So there's about $150,000 or $60,000. I'd have to look to see what page it's on. Can't remember if it's in the police or in the court fund, but there's about $160,000 expense as well.
Page 6, revenue category 450, public awards facilities. 25 had a budget of 610. Prior to that, it was 30, 40, 50,000 for those given years, and now it's up to 455.
So which line are you on?
On, revenue category 450,
Uh-huh.
line 45040.
So that is actually a reimbursement. And actually what you see is for 25, we budgeted 575, and for, this year we were budgeting 421, and that's actually a reimbursement from the utilities back to the city, because that public works facility serves everybody, but all the expense are in the general fund. And so we've broken down based on equipment, how much equipment each department has and how much. And so that 421 is basically the water utility and streets department paying back the city. That's what that is. So, and we've only had that last year was the first year we did it. It was a little higher. We kind of went back and reevaluated. We kind of overcharged, I think, for 25, and we haven't even made that transfer yet for 25, and that'll be something that'll get done before the end of the year.
And just a couple of observations and then a question. I noticed there's several departments that are basically asking for the same or less than what they did in previous years. And I just want to.
Well, so just for clarification, that's what's here. What we started with probably was, that's not necessarily, they didn't ask for less.
Yeah, we much
Or
higher,
get
yeah,
less.
much higher there, yeah. We had to be the Grinch.
Right.
You know, somebody had to be the Grinch. That's why I left the room and let David be the Grinch. So,
I think there's, if I remember correctly, I think street department may be one of those. One of the fire department. Talked about what a great job looking at just using their salary line. And I tried to annualize things. It's probably not exactly the right way of doing it, but if you look at 2025 year to date, I basically said, I bet these numbers are as of the end of November. So I annualized them. And if you look at the fire department's salary expenses so far for 2025, once they're annualized, and you compare that to 2024, that's only a 2% over where we are. Overall, we spent 9% more in the fire department, but what they're asking for this year is a 6% decrease over what they've spent this year. So,
right.
Question regarding the police, some of the police budgets. I know that we had to go back and pay some overtime that was due. And I don't remember exactly what that figure was. I know it was a lot. Is it
$160-ish thousand. So yeah, you'll see a pretty significant increase in the PD salaries, yeah. And that is because the PD was on you got paid 40 hours. I think it actually got paid a few more than that, maybe 44, 46 hours in the past. And then anything over that, you got comp time. So it got put in a bank account, a time account, basically a time bank. I'm sorry, I can't get the right words put together. And then, they're supposed to be able to use that. There's rules about it. Supposed to use it, and I don't know all the rules, but a certain amount of time, there's a maximum amount they're allowed to be able to build up. And really until, I guess, in the last year or so, they really were never allowed to use it. And a lot of them had more built up than was even supposed to be by law. John proposed that, hey, it's a pretty big morale problem when a guy works 50, 55 hours and then he gets a check for 44 and like, oh yeah, we'll get you for the rest. Don't worry about it. And that's pretty much what had been going on for 6-7 years. And so they switched from a comp time system to actual getting paid for what you work. And so that's the big check, that the checks or the large amounts that were paid out this year were to pay off all the overtime that was banked comp time all at once. to every officer that had stored it up over the
But that was over a multi-year.
multi-year
period.
period. And then what's budgeted for now is, so we know based on their schedule, we can't predict, you know, when something crazy happens and they end up working, but based on their schedule, you know how much overtime they should work if nothing extra happens. And so that's why that number is so much increase, is because now the overtime is built in instead of, you know, being saved up, essentially.
But clearly, I understand that our numbers were skewed this year because of that,
Right.
which covered, we paid for multiple years.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a slight, if you look at our annualized numbers so far for 2025, again, I'm on salary for the police department. If you look at our annualized number, I calculate that it's come out to be $1,444,000. That's so compared to that budget for 2026, you're talking about roughly a $63,000 difference. So our budget for 2026 is actually about, I think I just did it in my head, I think about 63,000 smaller than what our actual expenditures are. But it is overall, it's a 30% increase over 2024 expenditures. I mean, it's a big number.
Now,
There's some other numbers that, not a huge thing, but if you look at office expenses, on an annualized basis, we're at 51. We had a budget this year of 30. So we're 70% over budget there, and we're only budgeting 25 this year. One thing that's kind of a common theme, it seemed to me, when you look across all the departments, is there's heavy IT expenses. I mean,
there is
really, between insurance and IT, and of course salaries, those are the three big things right there. But that's just kind of the nature of the beast in today's world. We do the same thing with law enforcement.
It is, the IT is frustrating, not because of anything that our department's doing. It's just like all this risk there is now, and the effort it takes to mitigate those risks costs money, you know. You know, 5 years ago, never could have imagined that we would have to spend as much as we are. And that's another thing. If you look on the PD, they've got a line. Now, I will say on this one thing that's, like you said, office expenses over, you are seeing some, what I would call, learning curve from new administration, and charging things to the wrong place, and then figuring out, oh wait, we need to get better organized, and there's a new line on the back on page 36 that's never existed before. It's $110,000. It's called subscriptions. Some of those are scattered in some of these year to date from 2025, and that is a multitude of things, most of which are associated with, those are software, continuing the computer systems that are in the car. This year, class came up and did an audit and basically said, hey, you're supposed to do this, this, and this. Well, guess what? There's like $40,000 worth of software just overnight that they said we're not in compliance if we don't get them. And so, and then, you know, just the expense of being having 35 computers connected to the internet and all talking back to one server, it's expensive. There is, and I'll tell you, when the computers were added, even the people who, you know, helped build that system out didn't understand all the perpetual expense that kind of has come with that. It's just I mean, the company that we hired, they're like, hey, you do this, you're good to go. You know, you're going to pay $20 a month for each car, and bam, you're good to go. Well, that's not really accurate, you know. So it's kind of one of those things. You know, you go out and get a subscription for something, and then they tell you all the stuff and that wasn't even in the fine print that costs you money from now on if you want to keep it operational. A lot of stuff's been added to there. Even like, I mean, what I'm saying is like nobody knew those expenses were going to be 2 years ago when the computers were bought, purchased, put in service. It's just like that's just a load that just keeps getting heavier. Or I'm hoping it stops now, but we'll see.
Annual?
Yeah, this stuff's annual, and
Gonna be recurring
it's
now.
and there's been apparently, you know, and y'all know probably as much or more about this than I do. You know, there's efforts for cybersecurity issues that are constantly going in. Of course, that information is protected. You know, it's all criminal investigation, that kind of stuff. There's like serious protections around it. It's more protected than like the information we have here at City Hall. So they have to have extra stuff. I'm not an IT guy, so I'm not going to. Extra stuff is about my extent of the knowledge there. We have a list, you know, I didn't bring it, but there's a list they made of like every program and what it does and, you know, why we have it. But some of them are not that expensive. Some of them it's like $4,000, but then you got 3 or 4 of those, you know, that adds up pretty fast.
But I mean, did you say those are going to be annual fees? Those are going to be annual fees from here on out for that computer. Just like I mentioned earlier, it also, you know, 7, 8 years ago we had no IT. You know, our IT was Nick Baxter. You know, computer went down, Nick Baxter. You know, and now we started with 1 and now we have 3, and we probably need 3 more. And you know, another thing that and we're all aware of this, budget was, the council's there, is that we need firemen. You know, we left those firemen in there to the very end. And, we're going to have to figure out some way how we can get extra firemen at some point, you know, into these guys. The guys are doing a really wonderful job with limited individuals. We have 12 firemen, and we, you know, be good if we had 6 more, 8 more. But you know, we even try to squeeze 1, you know, just to try to. But we're going to have to continue to be creative and try to see what we can do. We know how important, you know, public safety is to all of our community. Very fortunate that we got a 2 rating, you know, this year. Hopefully we can maintain that. But at the end of the day, we're going to have to look in the direction and see public safety, city, county. We're challenged. So hopefully we'll, you know, I'm on the big beautiful bill. I keep hearing that there may be some funding out there, and I don't know if it'll just be for PD or whatever. But if we do get funding, maybe it'll free. If it is just for PD, maybe it'll free up some funds somewhere else.
Wherever it goes in the general fund, just makes it easier in every department.
Yeah, so. Makes it easier in every department there. So those are just some challenges that we know we have in front of us, and I'll be having a conversation hopefully with the county judge and see if we bounce some things off of him. But
hey, David, with regards to, maybe this is just a more of a structure of this budget. And so looking at the total revenue, I think it's on page 7. Yeah, 10.4. And then flipping over and comparing that with page 46, which shows income 4.08, which 70 or 46 is of course the O&M tax.
Right, so that's just the
O&M.
O&M.
That's not captured on the initial.
No, so the general fund is its own fund, which ends on page 44, and then O&M tax is its own fund that starts on 45.
And then we start the expenses after that. So
that's correct.
If we take those 2 funds together, the 10 and the 4, our estimated revenues 14 point something.
Yes. Yep. Yes, those 2 combined is essentially what fund, you know, the what we call the general, which is fire, police, parks, all the expensive departments, landscape, which is, you know, Johnny Abbott, his realm, animal control, code enforcement. Those two aren't very expensive, but fire, police, and parks, those are the three, most expensive. None of those three generate as much revenue as they cost by a long margin.
And then the water fund,
Mm-hmm.
page 56.
So then you have, after O&M, you have streets.
Yep.
So streets is its separate thing. And then you'll have, like you said, water.
Total expected revenue there, like 8.4. So if they're saying 14-ish plus 8.5, 24 point, about 25 million now, we're up to an expected revenue, right?
So water.
Public O&M and water funds, expected revenue,
Yes.
total probably about 25 million.
And then you got wastewater. That's a separate fund as well.
And speaking of water funding, we're on track to take in revenues of a little over 7.3 million for 2025. We're projecting in the budget to bring in 8.1. That's a 10% increase. Is that, you feel that's realistic?
So that is, we have a predetermined rate increases that go through 27 or 28. And so there's a rate increase in there. And there's one on wastewater as well.
So therefore it's not necessarily projected based off volume.
It's an increase, yeah. Right? And so we did a rate study probably 2 years ago, and the new water plant is being taken into consideration on water rates. You'll see there's a little more water increase there than there is on the wastewater side. Should be percentage wise, I think. I'd have to go back and double check that, but we're trying to be prepared. So when the new water plant comes online in 2 years, we don't go, oh, well, operational expense went up 35%. So now we're going to do a large rate increase all at once. So we're doing it as small as we can, stepping it up. It's just easier on the ratepayers.
Where is the revenue on the, let's say the water treatment?
So you got, so you have the water fund, which includes water administration, treatment, and construction. And then you'll have, I think the next thing will actually be capital, which is both of those combined. And then you'll have wastewater.
So utility capital fund is both of those combined?
Yeah, so capital, it's not both of them combined. The capital for water and wastewater are both in the utility capital. So, the large expenditures, the equipment replacement, and of course the large projects that are ongoing. They're in the utility capital, which is broken down in between depreciation and additions and improvements. And then the wastewater fund starts on page 67. And, right now we've estimated the revenues for that is to be 9.1. I see you working on a total, what's our total operational budget?
So obviously the key of all this is to get as accurate as you can on your guesstimates as far as what revenue is going to look like and what you have to work with.
Yep.
How will Bethesda factor in this?
Bethesda will add a little bit of revenue. I think they've got less than 600 customers. Really probably won't see it move the needle much. We will probably start investigating their line age and materials that they have in the ground once it becomes our responsibility, and probably start scheduling some maintenance, maybe line replacement. I know they've got some PVC in the ground that's of an age that is not great quality of pipe. There was a generation of PVC pipe kind of early that it hasn't lasted well. Pfeiffer has quite a bit of it in their system. All the rural systems do. It's very fragile. So we're probably going to start looking for that. So there'll be some, probably in the first 5 years, some, what I would estimate, capital expense. But that'll just be our efforts to make that system. Their water loss is 15-20%, which is not bad. That's pretty good water loss. Ours, we'll strive to get that little bit of the system. I mean, ours in the city of Batesville, we keep around 10, which is, like, if y'all do homework on that, that is phenomenal.
It's excellent.
Especially considering the age of some of our.
Right. We have pipe in the ground that has 1,890 something still stamped on it. But that's also, we use, that's cast iron pipe, and our modern standard is ductile iron. We don't have much PVC in our system, and that's where it shines, is the fact that you have very old pipe in the ground and a really low water loss. So, of course, I guess we'll kind of get on that Bethesda thing for a minute. That'll be on the next agenda for you guys to consider. Bethesda Rural Water Association had a meeting a month or so ago, and they voted, not the board voted, they took a vote of the members who were present. They had about 50 members present. They had about an hour discussion, and they voted to basically dissolve themselves and give themselves to Batesville Water. They have a guy who's single-handedly run their system from billing to maintenance for 25 or 30 years. Great individual, but there aren't any more people like that anymore. And they recognize that they probably will have to hire probably 3 or 4 people to do what that one guy's been doing. They might not all work full time, but that's a huge financial expense for them when, they're used to paying one guy. So that would make them have to raise the rates on themselves pretty significantly. And their board is, most of them have been doing it for decades, and they're tired of it, and they're ready to kind of pass the buck on to somebody else.
So will that just become Batesville Water and you have the one bill, or will you still have a separate?
So so assuming the first thing that has to happen, they've done their thing, so they've voted and said, hey, we propose that Bethesda Water dissolves. The next thing that has to happen is the city council will have to pass a resolution that says we accept your gift, more or less. I mean, it's more technical than that, and then we have to, Bethesda and Batesville both have to send an application to Arkansas Natural Resources Commission asking permission for that to take place. And I don't know how long that will take. I don't know the real ins and outs, if that's a 5-minute review for them or a 5-month review for them to determine. And then once that happens, yes, it will become Batesville Water, and Bethesda Water will be dissolved, and there will be one. Their bills, the people on the Bethesda water system will get a bill, just a water bill only bill from us. That'll look just like all the other Batesville water bills.
Where do they get their water?
Batesville. We sell them their water.
Right.
So, I mean, for us, we'll stage, they've got a tank and a pump station, and we'll stage equipment and material out there in case, so in the middle of the night when there's a water leak or something, we won't have to haul stuff, 15 miles. But I'm sure we'll have to haul some stuff because you never have what you need. But for us, it'll be pretty easy, really. I mean, we've got a lot of staff and good quality staff.
Will this result in more revenue for us?
Well, certainly it'll create more revenue. 500 some odd customers worth. I don't know the exact number, 550 more or less customers worth of water revenue. Yes.
But they were already buying water from us.
So they bought water from us at a wholesale rate. And so, of course, now we will not sell water to them the Bethesda wholesale rate, we'll just collect the retail rate from their customers direct.
That's the uptick.
So,
That's-
right, so there'll be some increase.
And we get infrastructure, right?
Yes, and they have a little bit of debt that will address pretty promptly, but they also have some cash and they have some assets. They have a building in Bethesda. They've got 2 tanks in their system, so I mean it's we're probably getting more than it'll cost us in the long run. And what we don't end up is the danger is if they were to hire a third party or to try to do it themselves and their system goes in decline, we don't want that to happen either.
Damon, speaking of revenue, is Cushman working on their past due paying us in?
Well, I mean, Cushman's, their bill's still larger than they're capable of paying right now. I don't know if y'all got the email. They brought in a packet of information basically showing all the work that they've been doing, that they've got planned. They do have some pretty significant work planned, but I mean, and I'll testify to this. I mean, these projects take 2 or 3 years to plan, fund, and then get done. So it just takes a long time. I do think that maybe in 2 or 3 years we'll see some pretty significant reduction in their water usage. But right now, I mean, they don't have enough revenue to pay their water bill. Their loss is still significant.
Just real quick under Water Utility Administration, just some numbers that seem to vary quite a bit. It's on page 56 under credit card expenses. It shows that our budget for 2025 was $80,000, but we spent $180,000.
Which page are you on?
I'm on page 56 of 70.
Okay.
Under credit card expenses. But then our budget for 2026 is 45. So I guess first I'm just curious exactly what that is and how does it vary?
So that is that's something that Clint has, since he's come on, has been working on very diligently. He recognized pretty quickly, like, man, something's wrong there. We budgeted 80,000, we've charged 197. So our credit card processing people in 25 raised our fee significantly. They take a little
Discount.
3% or 5% or whatever the percentage is on every transaction, or they add it to the transaction, I guess. And we were not passing that on to the customer. The utility was eating that fee. What has happened and why it's gone to $4,500 is, one, he shopped and been able to change credit card processing company, and we're actually we had multiple companies. Like the online pay was one company, you come in here and pay by credit card was another company. There was like 3 or 4 different ones, and he's consolidated under one company, negotiated a better rate, and then if you choose to use your credit card instead of paying another way, the customer is going to cover that 2%. Am I right? Is it 2%? What is he's negotiated, or 2.5%, something like that?
3.5?
Clint's right.
I got it. I took it. Got it before. It's 3.5.
3.5, not 2.5. Yeah. So that's why instead of the utility eating it, the customer, if they choose to use your credit card now, will, just like everywhere else in the world.
Convenience fee,
Right.
which is typical
Typical of any credit card. And
Yeah.
the revenue office.
If I was smart, I would have got on the credit card processing business a long
3%
time
or
ago.
whatever.
Yeah, because they do nothing except for just send it from us to your bank or wherever. you know, but they take 3.5%. So that's why that's a big change there.
Another thing that we have consistently done in our apartments and the water department, I think there's a couple vehicles that we'll be purchasing through the water department, and they'll be handing them down to our departments that are in need. So that's one always an expense, you know.
Anytime.
Point A to point B, got a lot of vehicles going here. I don't care if it's mowing the lawn or taking care of something. You don't have to be there in a vehicle, and so.
Yeah, fortunately, the water utility, you know, is financially sound enough where, you know, it's not as difficult to buy vehicles or equipment. And so oftentimes when we buy a new vehicle, you know, in the construction department, we will pass the vehicle that's going to not be needed anymore, might be a 3 or 4 year old vehicle, and hand it to a city department to continue to use, that where it may be a little more difficult to find the money to purchase a new vehicle.
Hey, Damon, on page 51, the O&M. So we're on page 46, we show our total expected revenue for O&M, right? We'll go through the expenses. And at the bottom, on 51, we see some negative numbers from previous years.
Yep.
What is that from, and why do we not expect to see another negative numbers?
Well, one, because we cannot budget to lose money. We're not supposed to lose money. So as far as, I think 2025 shows to be negative, which is what you see. And I don't think we will be negative by the end of the year once all the collections come in. Most of the spending is stopped in O&M. There's just a little bit of continual spending, but what happens most of the O&M stuff is capital or big project stuff. So it's like big expenses kind of all at once. And then, but the sales tax revenue just comes in, you know, monthly. So like you see, we're upside down $140,000. I think our last, it's going to be pretty close, but we should see $150,000 to $170,000 on the last check of the year from. I can't explain to you why 2024, without doing a deeper dive, is upside down as it's shown. I'm assuming that there was some. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they do like transfer, like what do you call it, Jessica? Where y'all, they go back. The accountants say, hey, you need to go back and make a journal entry. Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. It's
slightly affect our numbers sometimes.
Right.
And so it might not be true with accurate.
So yeah, sometimes those journal entries, and I'm not an accountant, so I can't explain to you why they say go back and do this or that. But I'm sure we can look a little harder if we need to, to understand what's going on in 2024's. But 2025, which is where we are right now, we do not anticipate being negative by the end of the year.
Well, more than anything, I just want to make sure that we're at our expectations properly set given numbers of previous years.
And if you really look, a lot of the expense in the O&M are grants that we have currently running. And, you know, so there's a revenue and then there's the expense, because the grant is the revenue, but then usually the expense is, you know, usually they're 80-20. So, you know, the expense is a little more than the revenue. And we tried to plan ahead, like break them apart. I mean, cause you never get them done in 1 year, but some of them we're not sure about. So that, like, the whole thing is probably in here. The ones we think that may actually like go to construction in this year, but the reality is they may run over into 2 years. So you don't end up spending all that money, and even though it's all budgeted to be spent here. you know. But that's just information.
Dana, what was I know we're gonna do some upgrades to our water or sewer, we're doing upgrades, but they're like a $4 million.
Yeah, so it's actually in the utility capital, find it. Utility capital fund. We on page 64 you just see like some equipment we're purchasing, we're scheduling to purchase, and then also some repairs that we know need to be done in the wastewater plant, I think, mostly. Yeah. And then on the last page, you see, is basically where we have additions and improvements. And what the mayor's talking about is that sewer line rehab project. And that's actually the last official project associated with the consent administrative order that we're under for with ADQ. And to give you a quick, and right now we've got budgeted $6.5 million in that sewer rehab. We actually have a little revenue. Did we put any revenue in there? Yeah, we did. With the old, so when the wastewater tax sunsetted or transferred over to the water, it stopped. But it takes a little time for that to happen, so a little bit of money builds up. And so we have that money. There it is on page 63. See, there's still $1.2 million left in that old wastewater fund that has to be spent on wastewater only. So we actually, that helps that project. Basically knocks the actual money coming out of our bank down by $1.3 million because we're using that on wastewater improvement. To give you all an update on the CAO, we had a meeting 2 or 3 weeks ago with ADQ, myself and some of the Olson engineers, and kind of made a presentation with them. I felt like it went pretty well. We submitted an official report last week. We kind of wanted to get their feel before we submitted the report in person. I feel like that we gave them some significant data to show that we have accomplished their concerns in the consent order, and so I feel really good, like they're going to let us go from our consent administrative order, which is the plan. We've spent tens and tens of millions of dollars to accommodate that, and that needed to be spent. I mean, our wastewater system was in pretty rough shape in 2007, and it's spectacular today.
So you probably have one of the most up to date around the state. Right?
Yeah.
So it just takes a while to get there.
Yeah, and that's a prime example. If you want to compare, I mean, we basically started in 2007 trying to solve our sewer system issues, and this is 25. It took that long. Cushman, back to your point earlier, Fred, they're in the same situation just with their water system. It's going to take them that long to fix it. They've got a 20-year thing in front of them.
Well, I won't be around when they fix it, but that's.
Damon, could you also elaborate? I know we got about 15 or 20 grand in for an evaluation study on our water meters.
Yes, so
this is something it's going to help us on down the line. But if you want to elaborate, you know more about that water meters than I do. I know Clint has done a lot of. Clint's done a fantastic job in doing some deep dives into, just like you said, our software and our expenses and everything.
So currently our water meters that are in place are approximately 16 to 18 years old. The life expectancy on a water meter is 20. So we are on the precipice of having, and of course they all have batteries in them because we radio read, You know, the vehicle drives by, gets the reading, it's sending out a signal. And we're already having pretty big blocks of meters fail each month where they quit reading. Now, they're still reading the water usage. They're just not communicating the signal. But, you know, we don't have enough staff to go out there and manually read meters anymore. That used to take a team of people when we did that manually. And we went to switch to this, when we put in these meters we have now, the radio read meters, you know, we were able to reduce our meter reading staff by like 4 people. So, but you know, they don't last forever. We're at the end of their life. And when we have to replace a meter right now, Badger's the meter brand we use. We install the new meters are cell phone. And of course that comes with a fee. Every single meter has a cell phone fee associated with it when you put it in. We basically, Clint has been doing some legwork. There's some excellent meter companies out there that we're investigating. And so this company, there's a company called Scribbler, I'm saying it wrong, and they basically go in and evaluate the options you have, the companies that supply them in your area, the kind of system that they offer, because some are some set up internal radio systems where they communicate, without cell phone involvement, and so there's lots of variables to it. Some of them have longer life expectancy than others, and so basically for that $15,000, I think we put 20 in there. I think the real quote was 12. But I just put a little bit of extra money in there because any extra expenses that might come up. But essentially, they're going to do a study and help us determine, hey, Badger is probably the best thing, or census meter would be a better system to go with, and then we'll have another $5 million project to replace all our water meters, which will be, forthcoming. If we decide we need to do that in 2026, we'll come to you and ask for permission to do that. We did not budget to do that. I want to evaluate and do the study and then kind of figure out in-house what we think our best move is before we budget to spend $4 or $5 million. So,
I may be speaking out of line here, but I want to say some of the new technology, they'll be able to turn your water on and off by the push of the button here.
So there's a significant cost associated with that, but that opportunity is out there. And that's some of the evaluation we can do is, hey, do you do that to your whole system, or do you say we're going to do 10% and we're going to put it on the meters where we have lots of activity of on and off, and then the people who, my water meter hadn't been turned off in 20 years, so why do we need to spend an extra $1,000 on my meter just so that we can turn it off and on? Well, we never will, until I move. That's just some of the stuff we've got to determine and evaluate.
Also, there's the capability of possibly, if there's a line leaking somewhere,
yeah,
it could detect leaks or whatever in a household. So there's a lot of new technology out there, and like I said, this company will explore all of those things for us. So because we spend a lot of time going in and out turning. Of course, like you said, there's probably a select group. Probably a lot of these are rentals.
Yeah.
That we see a lot of activity in, and I'm sure we can probably identify those in house of how many times we turn them on and off. But that's right now. If we have a water leak, we have to go out and check and see if the meter's going. And a lot of folks, and of course, it's from the water line on back. It's on the household, but maybe at some point we get that technology and help everybody.
No matter what system we go to, there will be I have an expectation that we will. Like right now, we only know what happens. We can only compare month to month. We go out and read, and then 30 days later, roughly, we go out and read again, and we can compare, and then look at history, like, oh, this customer all of a sudden has way more water usage, and so there's something hinky going on. They've got a water leak or they've got a problem of some kind that we can talk to them about. But like the mayor's saying, with the new stuff, whether we end up with cell or whether we end up with a radio system that communicates, there should be like real-time communication. We will be able to have real-time knowledge of what's going on with every water meter in the system. At that point, once we switch to a newer system, which would be great information to have. So the system we can put in parameters, whatever we go with, that says, hey, if you see a so much increase, it sends us a thing. And then that way, when, Rob's toilet starts leaking and he doesn't know it, we can notify you within maybe within a week of it starting, instead of waiting 30 days and, hopefully be better customer service, basically.
I think the last question I had was on page 49 under police pension contributions. A lot of variation in that. If you look at 2024 actual expenditures versus 2025, again, it's on page 49. 2025 annualized. In 2024, we went to 189, from 189,000 to 301,000 annualized. That's 37% increase. Now, of course, I'm sure there's a formula that tells you exactly what that has to be. But then from 2025 to the budget of 2026, that's another 27% increase. So if you put those two together, you go from 2024 actual to 2026 budget over a two-year period of time. That's an increase of 102%. Seems like a lot.
So I will, and Jessica might help me here, but so there's a 2025 number is skewed because of there had to be a large.
I understand. That makes sense, but it seemed like we would be past that and we wouldn't have that large of an increase again for 2026.
Well, except for Lotfi sent a letter that said it's going up a huge percentage. And I think it went up for police and fire. Of course, there's just not as many firemen, so that doesn't move the needle as far. But like you said, that number right there is set based on a percentage, based on their estimated salaries, and we don't even.
So they tell us what
they tell us what it is. We have no choice. Same thing on APRS. If you look, it's the same. Yeah. Now the APRS didn't go up as much as Lotfi did, so the police and fire have Lotfi, and then everybody else has APRS retirement in the city. But next year they might, APRS might come and say, oh, we're going up 30% or whatever. It's a lot. I mean, right now, what do we pay? 15.32,
I believe.
On the APRS.
City's contribution, and the employee pays 5.
Yeah.
Which will go up in July.
Yeah. And they just, they run their actuary and just say, this is what we got to do to keep it solvent. They just send out a letter, and you got to deal with it.
Hey, council, any other questions? I'm gonna send this home with you. And one thing I do want to add to those comments is, I was at my conference a couple weeks ago, had the opportunity to visit with several mayors, and seem like all of them are struggling this year with budgets. I think they're facing the same thing. Visiting with Russell Slater, and their employees is getting 0%. They're not, and we could have probably done the same thing and not even absorb the insurance. But I think you guys know that we want to always try to, put the money, to our employees. They keep our lights on. Now, with exceptions, of course, Northwest Arkansas is a totally different game. Springdale was getting 5%, increase. But if their communities of sales tax revenue and just a lot of things happened in Northwest Arkansas, but the majority of them I visited with was having those same challenges. I thought it was just Batesville, Arkansas, so it's always good to compare notes with your peers, and see how they're doing, but anyway, take this, look at it. Our next council meeting will be on, our council meeting will be the 16th. Is everyone still good with the 16th? Any problems with that? So that'll probably be our last council meeting before. We'll probably have quite a few things on the agenda, including the possibility of the budget. But get to us early. Like I said, do a deeper dive. You've got this on paper now. I know sometimes on your iPhone you can't, and I've tried to do that thing, look through it. So this is out in front of you, but if you do find anything or any type of mistakes, and we hope you find $100,000 mistake to the good or to the bad on this that we can reflect on. But like I said, this thing's been combed over and looked over and turned over every rock and everything else, and so anyway, appreciate everybody coming tonight. Like I said, don't hesitate to give us a call and give us a shout. I got an amen.
Thanks.